Hello, thank you for joining me. Today we'll be talking about sexual consent in a marriage or in a relationship. Now, I have seen so many people get very offended by the idea that they have to ask for consent when they are married or in a committed relationship. Now, I get it. Sex is usually seen as part of the deal when we get married or we enter a serious relationship. And yes, to a certain extent, it is part of the deal. And I understand the frustration that comes when you want to engage in sexual activity and your partner doesn't. We've all been there, we get it. However, it's important to remember that it's also true that marriage does not give us ownership of our partner's body or sexuality. So I think one of the things that makes the idea of asking for consent so tricky is sometimes the word. The word can sometimes seem a little intimidating, a little dry. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to just talk a little bit about what exactly is consent, why do we have to ask consent, and maybe a little bit about how to ask for consent. So let's get started. Now, consent. Plainly put, consent is actively, freely, happily agreeing to engage in sexual activity. What does that mean? It means that if you're constantly telling your partner, come on, let's do it. Come on, we're married. Come on, let's go. And you get mad at your partner and they eventually say, okay, fine, let's do it. No, that's not consent. Or if you just go and begin sexual activity physically with your partner and they cannot say no or they can't fight back because you are their partner and they feel that that is what they have to do, that is also not consent. It's important for us to keep that in mind. They have to just freely and willingly be agree to participate in sexual activity. Now, why do we have to ask for consent? So there are many reasons why asking for consent is important. I have worked with many survivors of sexual trauma or domestic violence or just any type of sexual trauma. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that some people come with certain triggers, with certain things that are difficult for them. And sex can be sometimes traumatic, sometimes can be scary, sometimes it can be embarrassing. So when we don't take the time to ask for consent and ask your partner if they are ready to participate in any kind of sexual activity, we can be making that trauma even stronger. We can be re-traumatizing them. We can be making them enjoy the experience a lot more difficult. Therefore, yes, it's very important to ask for consent. Another thing is, yes, we all have different libidos. We all have different ideas of how often we want to have sex. We all are in the mood at different times. And that is totally normal. That happens to a lot of us where we might be in the mood and our partner isn't. Maybe they're not feeling well. So for that reason, a lot of times we have to stop and be and understand that our partner is not in the same place as we are. Now, like I said, I understand that sometimes it can be frustrating when you are ready to participate in sexual activity and your partner is not. So at this point, it's really important for us to communicate with our partners and talk about what our partner needs and talk about what we need as their partner. If we communicate without being angry, without blaming anyone, but communicate about what our needs are and what is causing this disruption, it's a good way to start fixing and maybe coming in sync with your partner. So communication is a great way. Now, why else do we have to ask for consent? Like I said before, asking for consent is important because even though, yes, many times sex is part of the deal, it is also important to remember that we do not own our partner's body or sexuality. It is their body and it is their sexuality. And they do have the right to be able to say, yes, I want to, yes, let's do it, or no, not today, I'm just not in the mood, it's just not the right time. So now let's talk a little bit about how. Now, the idea of asking for consent, like I said, sometimes seems a little dry, maybe a little misunderstood. we do not have to say to our partner, hello, today I would like to engage in sexual activity. Is that okay with you? Not necessarily. You can. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's many ways of asking for consent that don't necessarily require you even to talk more than a sentence. And a lot of this has to do, a lot of times, just communicating. Like I said earlier, communication is key in a lot of this. So maybe just having a special word between you and your partner that you both understand. You can say, for example, Marco, and if your partner says Polo, then there you go. You can maybe hug them and see how they respond. Or if you kiss them, do they respond back? So these are all ways that asking for consent that maybe don't necessarily require you to say, is it okay if we engage in sexual activity today? But just asking them, or just saying, hey, you in the mood, or anything can be a great way to ask them for consent. That doesn't have to be dry or serious. And many of us do it anyways. Many of us just do it without really thinking that we're asking for consent. I mean, many of us have gone to our partner and started to initiate, and they say, oh, I don't feel good, I have a headache, whatever it is. And the important thing is that we learn that, okay, we can back up. And that's one of the last things that I want to say. One of the important things with consent is that consent is revocable. Yes, your partner can say, yeah, let's do it. And then for whatever reason, something happens and they say, you know what, I just can't, whatever, I'm really tired. So consent can always be revocable. And at that time, like I said, you communicate and figure out, okay, how can we fix this? What do we need to do different next time? So consent is very important. And understanding that your partner can change their mind is very important. And I can assure you that your partner will be more willing to try a lot of different things if you let them know that they can change their mind at any time and say, okay, I want to stop. So with that being said, just a little review. We talked about what consent is: actively, freely agreeing to participate in sexual activity. Why do we ask for consent? Because our bodies and our sexuality belong to us, nobody else. So we get to choose when and where we decide to participate in sexual activity. And how? Let's make it fun. Let's make it something that we enjoy, and that as a couple, we're both enjoying and we're both actively consenting to their sexual activity. I hope this information was very useful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. You can ask in the comments. You can send me a question. I'm always happy to answer any questions. Thank you for listening.